Hey, it's TDA, and welcome to episode 12 of this perfect proliferation run. As you can see, our base is shaping up very nicely, and we're almost ready to leave our star system in order to continue on to the universe exploration part of the game. However, there's a few housekeeping things that we still need to do. Specifically, we need to make sure we are making use of our gas giant in our system, and we are also making use of the stuff that comes out of the gas giant. And then last but not least, as a few of you have been commenting, I'm still using graphene to power up my mech, and honestly it's getting a little tedious and outdated by now. It works fine, especially if you have proliferated graphene like I do. It works just fine if that's what you want to keep using, but there's better ways to do that, so that is what I want to focus on in this episode. Now, let's move on to the first topic, Fire Ice and Deuterium. And I present to you a pretty awesome build for Fire Ice. It's really straightforward. It is just chemical plants producing graphene from Fire Ice and being proliferated along the way. It is also currently not functioning. Why is it not functioning? Well, that's very simple, because I don't have Fire Ice in my system. So there's basically two versions of gas giants that you can have in your system. I have the version that has hydrogen and deuterium. Your gas giant should always have hydrogen, so that's not special, but the deuterium part might also be Fire Ice in your system. If you have Fire Ice, consider yourself lucky, because I think of the two, it's clearly the better one. But unfortunately I don't, and it's about 50-50 chance I think you get the deuterium version. So we'll have to deal with that. On the upside, we are getting a small amount of deuterium for free. Now, just to make sure you know how this works, as you can see, the production is not that high, but you can place 40 orbital collectors on your gas giant. Now, that means that basically you need to multiply this production speed by 40, and that means that you get a decent amount, especially from hydrogen and deuterium. Well, still not that much, but it's going to be pretty useful to have that free deuterium coming in. Mining speed, the research you can do, the vein utilization as it is called, is also applied to the production of your gas giant, so it's actually a little bit more than what it's currently showing. But yeah, still not that much. And of course, we are going to have to make a build for deuterium in order to make sure we have enough of that stuff. So let's get to that. Now, there's two ways you can make deuterium, so let's check that out. We have the option to use fractionation, and that is basically putting in hydrogen and with a very low probability getting deuterium out. However, taking into account, even though it's just 1%, if you have a 30 speed belt, a Mark III belt, it's basically 30 times as much. It's 30 times 1% per second. And then you can do a little trick with the autopiler, or stacker as I like to call it, because if you stack it up, you actually quadruple the input that you have into your fractionators. So you actually end up with a pretty decent flow of deuterium coming out. The second option is just making deuterium in a particle collider straight from hydrogen, and even though that's a perfectly fine way to do it, keep in mind that this is going to cost you a ton of power, because if you check out the particle collider, it needs 12 megawatts in order to function, so that's a huge amount compared to the fractionator that only uses 720. Now, of course, the production speed of a particle collider is going to be much higher, but all in all, you can put down something like 15 of these, and you will get the same power usage as your particle collider, despite the fact that this is actually producing less. So all in all, I highly prefer using the fractionator, not in the least, of course, because if we are using proliferated items, taking into account that this energy consumption is actually going to be even higher than what it currently shows. All right, so let's get to that. Okay, this is as good a place as any, so let's place down an ILS and let's get started. We are going to want to be requesting hydrogen and having deuterium going out, so this is going to be a pretty straightforward build with one little detail that is going to be of interest, and that is how we are going to use the stackers. Now, stackers need a lot of room, so I am going to have to make sure I have a little bit of that room. And stackers are used in the following way. They can either stack or unstack an item, and that is exactly what we're going to do. Now I am going to make sure I leave a little bit of room, just to make sure that we don't get into any clipping issues. And what we're going to do is we're going to take out a belt like this, and a second belt like that, and a third belt like that. And by doing so, we will have 4 belts worth of hydrogen coming out, assuming of course we have that much. Now these 2 belts are going to combine over here. So this stacks everything up by 2, so you'll have little stacks of 2. So basically that means we can have those 2 stacks being combined on a single belt to have a full belt of 2 stacked hydrogen. Then what we're going to do is we are going to stack up those 2 stacks to get a 4 stack of hydrogen. So this is what I mean by a 4 stack is basically 4 items on top of each other and then being combined. Now, stacking those 2 up means we now have stacks of 4, and these are going to be combined into a single belt, which is going to go something like this. Then of course we do want to make sure we are proliferating that stuff. And then I am actually going to need to be a little bit creative with these belts, and I'll show you why in a second. So this is going to be a belt that is inputting like this, and this belt, this direction will get priority, and that matters, as I will show you in a moment. Now, fractionators, as you can see, they have 2 sides going in and out. The hydrogen will actually go through this building. And let's see, let's place 4, 5, 6, 7, actually let's just make 12, so 15 is the maximum amount, minus 3. That is 12. And then let's place another row like this. This is basically going in the opposite direction. Now what we can do is we are going to input the hydrogen on one side, then let it go through, let it go through, let it go through. And this should get us very close to about a full belt of deuterium. It's not going to be that much for a few reasons. First of all, that assumes that the stacks on the belt are still stacked to 4. And of course, once some of the hydrogen is being used in order to make deuterium, that will not be the case. Especially not near the end of this belt. But all in all, I don't think that's necessarily a problem. It also won't be the case because we probably won't have enough hydrogen to actually completely stack up the amounts that I am talking about. Now, if you want, you could actually, and we can actually do that on this side probably, put in a stacker somewhere. And why would you want to do that? Well, that is to basically stack back up the items that were destacked before. That's just to this basically just ensures that we keep our deuterium production on the second half of the belt close to optimal as far as we care and can. Now, apologies if you heard that. I just knocked over a few things on my desk. We want to power this up, request some hydrogen, and see how that works. Okay, there we go. We have our proliferation set up. We fixed all the belts. We have power, and we have a lot of hydrogen in our system. Now, we also need to make sure the deuterium has somewhere to go. Now, let's fire it up and see if this works like we want it to. So you can see the stackers doing their job. The items are being stacked up 2 by 2 initially, and then 4 by 4 later on. So let me zoom in, and well, due to the speed it's hard to see, but these are 4 little boxes of hydrogen on top of each other. Now, of course, we are also proliferating that, so we get the maximum amount of throughput. And as you can see, we are getting an insane amount of deuterium on this belt. And of course, there's a lot of that on the other belt as well. And that is all thanks to the proliferation. So this is more deuterium than we're ever going to need. I'm actually not entirely sure if we actually need this stacker at the end, but hey, why not? We have it, might as well use it. As you can see, the speed is slowing down a little bit, but this should supply us with about a full belt worth of deuterium. Now, there's a little detail in this build, and that is this belt looping around like this. Why did we make it like that? Well, we made it like that so we always have this going on. This actually does slow down your build a little bit, because as you can see, not all of this is completely stacked up to 4 anymore, so that will slow down the production a little bit. Not to a point that we care, but it is worth noting that it actually does slow down your production. And whenever there's a little room on the belt, there's a full stack going back in. Now this just makes sure that this build will never stop functioning unless, well, the deuterium is completely full. But it's kind of key, because it's really easy to make a fractionator build that actually gets stuck at some point. Now, if the lack of stacking in this build bothers you, then of course all you need to do is put in a few more stackers along the way, and that problem will be solved. But keep in mind that whenever it goes through one of these facilities, there will be there will be something missing from a stack. So it gets really annoying to make sure that everything is completely stacked up all the time. As you can see, it has been functioning for a little while now. We still get a huge amount of production going here, and we have thousands of deuterium, even though I've been only talking for like a minute. So optimized to your liking, but I would recommend just keeping it as is. Now, let's actually do something with all this deuterium, shall we? Well, the most obvious use for deuterium is deuterium fuel rods, and those are going to solve pretty much all our powering problems, because if you compare the amount of energy that goes into a fuel rod to what goes into graphite, as you can see, this is 6.75 by default, with a 50% bonus in the fuel chamber, so that is about 50% more, of course, than the 6.75. The deuterium is going to give us a 600, but on top of that it's going to give us a 300 bonus, and this is unproliferated, so hold that thought. Now, it's actually quite expensive to make these things, and we don't need large amounts of it, because other than powering our own mech, we can use this to power fission power plants, fusion power plants, and as you can see, a fusion power plant provides 50 megawatts worth of energy, so that's quite a lot. We've been producing these in our mall, so we have access to them, and if we produce just 2 deuterium fuel rods per second, we will be able to power 80 of these fission plants, so that's quite a lot. And of course, in terms of how much energy we need from these fuel rods, is also not going to be that much. So for now, we are going to make a build that provides us with 2 per second. Now, first things first, let's put down an ILS. I'm actually running low on these things. And place it down. Let's not be too close to the initial hotline. And let's see what we need to do. We are going to need some iron, we are going to need some copper, and we are also going to need some titanium over here. We're actually going to need more than that, but let's focus on those 3 for now. We are going to have a belt with iron over here, a belt with copper over here, and then a belt with titanium over there. Okay, and we are going to put down some smelters, and let's make sure we leave enough room for our proliferation, because we don't want to make that mistake. There we go. Let's turn off the blinking lights for now. There we go. And let's see, how much do we need? We are going to need a row of 6 magnet smelters. So these are going to be magnets. And what else do we need? Well, we are going to need some iron. And in terms of iron, what we need is a total of 5 iron production. And like I said, simple plain iron. Now, we are also going to have to produce a few other things. So we are going to have to produce copper. Let's see, where are we going to do that? Well, let's start with titanium actually. Let's put the titanium over here. We only need 1 of those. And then we are going to need some steel, and we are going to need some... let's put the steel over here, and we are also going to need some copper, as I said. This is going to be the steel, like that. And then this is going to be the copper production. Now, as you can see, we don't need that much of it, simply because, of course, we are not going to be making that many fuel rods. But even though you would think this is not going to be a large build, I think you will be surprised, because it actually turns out to be quite large. Well, relatively speaking, of course, because we're only producing 2 end products per thing. Let's see. So this is going to be the iron. There we go. And then we're going to have titanium on this belt. And then last but not least, we are going to have steel on this belt. Now, the steel itself, this is going to go on this belt, the iron, and then the steel is going to pick it up and then place it on this belt. And just to make sure we don't forget what we're doing, this is going to be the belt for the titanium, this is going to be the belt for the copper, and then this is going to be the belt for the iron ore, and then this is going to be the iron itself, this is going to be the titanium, and then this is going to be, oh, let's put it there, this is going to be steel, because we can take out these two. Then we are going to have the magnets on this one, and we are going to have copper on this one. And then actually we are going to need one more, and that is some graphite. And there's not really a good place to place it here, but we do need to have a belt with incoming graphite, incoming coal that is. That needs to go out, and let's put that on this side, I think. Yeah, I think this should do. And then we can do that, something like this. And then of course we do need to make sure we are proliferating that as well. It does need to actually go on the belt in order to work. There we go. All right, let's clean up this part of the base and then let's continue on. Okay, now this is where things get interesting, because we actually have to kind of fit a whole lot of different production elements into this build, even though it's not going to be a large amount of them. So we are going to need 2 buildings producing cogs, and we'll be placing those over here. And of course they can feed from this belt, and we can have an outgoing belt in the middle over here, and we're going to need to leave some room. Now we also are going to need some magnetic coils, so what I want to do with those is put them over here. And we're also going to need 2 of those, and just to make sure we don't forget to change this, let's do that now. And then once again we can have an outgoing belt down there. The magnets are going to come in over here, which is nice and convenient, and then the copper is going to come in over here. Now we are also going to need to be proliferating these elements, so let's do that over here. And now there's basically 2 directions in which we can go. We can try to kind of loop that around, or we can just go for a longer type of build. Considering the amount of buildings in this specific build, I am actually going to go for a longer build rather than trying to make it square, and that has also to do with the fact that we have so many places where we need to proliferate stuff. So in case you were wondering, that is why I'm doing it like that. Now I'm also going to go against my word there for a little bit, because I am actually going to make the engines be built on, not on this side actually, let's build them on this side. We're going to need 3 of those, so these is going to be producing engines, and they need the cogs, the iron, as well as the coils. We have the coils in reach over there, we have the cogs in reach on the other side, and then we have to extend this belt in order to have access to the iron, was the word I was looking for. Okay, now that means we can output these over here. The question is, do I really want to output them over here? No, I don't actually. We're going to take this belt down a notch, and then we're going to place this belt over here. And we are going to extend that. This is going to be our engine belt, but our turbines are going to be built over here. And Let's make sure we align that though, because we don't want to misalign our buildings. That would trigger way more things than I am confident I can handle. Okay, so now we have our coils, cogs, engines, and turbines. And the turbines need the magnetic coils as well as the engines. The coils are over here, so that should be we should be good to go in that respect. But we have a little problem because, of course, our engines are not currently proliferated. Well, we can fix that by doing. Well, we could be proliferating them over here. But the problem is that we are conflicting with this, so we are actually going to proliferate them all the way out here. Then we're going to flip it around and take it back. And then we have an outgoing belt of turbines over here. And then, of course, we are going to be proliferating that. Copy paste, please. Yes, there we go. And then we have proliferated turbines. Now, once again, I am going to kind of clean this build up and make sure we have all the belts in the correct places and the sorters in place, etc., before we continue on to, I think, the last part of this build. So while rearranging this, I actually decided, hey, let's make use of that little open space we have over there and put in a graphite smelter. We only need one of them, and this will make sure our coal gets turned into graphite and it's being proliferated over here. Now, these 3 belts actually need to come down a little bit because we want to be producing our magnetic rings over here. We're going to need only 2 of those, and the magnetic rings, as you probably know, need the turbines, magnets, and the graphite. So we have all of those now being produced. So that means we can now have an outgoing belt over here that will be making use of the supermagnetic rings. Now, we also want to be smelting some alloy, and let's space them out a little bit so it's nicely aligned with the rest of the stuff we're doing. And you might be shouting at me now, hey, but you forgot the acids. Well, yes and no. I didn't actually forget about it, but I actually did not put it in just yet. But of course that won't be a problem because we can easily fix that. Now, this is actually misaligned, so let's move this up a little bit. So I want to be aligning this with this other facility over here. Now we have this and this, and now we're actually going to get the incoming sulfuric acid from somewhere over there. Not quite sure where just yet. That does mean we need to make sure we are proliferating that. So let's put in a proliferator over here and one over here. And then of course we do have the outgoing belt with alloy over there as well, that we are going to have to proliferate. And just to make sure we know what's on what belt, that should fix that. Okay, so almost done. We just need the actual production of the fuel rods. And it might surprise you, but we actually need quite a few of these. We need 10 in total, so we're going to put 5 on this side and 5 on that side. Now remember, the fuel rods is one of those items that need 3 inputs, so we can't place everything on the same side in terms of the inputs, because otherwise we'll have a problem. Well, we have 2 of the inputs on the inside, so it's the alloy and the rings. So that means that we'll have to put the deuterium, which of course we have been mass producing in the meanwhile, on the outside. That means that what we can do, we can have an outgoing belt. Oh, it doesn't really matter actually. So we have an incoming belt with deuterium on this side, an incoming belt with deuterium on that side, and then we have an outgoing belt of fuel rods on that side and an outgoing belt of fuel rods on that side. Now, of course, we do need to make sure we are proliferating all of that, so the inputs is going to be proliferated over here, and then the outputs are going to be proliferated in the exact same spot. So let's make sure we're not putting them on top of each other. There we go. Okay, and then last but not least, we are going to place in an ILS. Probably over here. Yeah, I think that should be fine. That ILS is going to request some acid. That ILS is also going to be requesting deuterium. It's going to be exporting the fuel rods, and that also means that we have some room left for warpers, and we have some room left for proliferation. And that should be making quite efficient use of our ILS. So this is the belt with the acid. Then this is the belt with the deuterium. We can take that one out. And this is the incoming belt with the fuel rods. And then on the other side, same thing. We are going to have incoming deuterium over there. And then outgoing fuel rods over there. And then all we need to do is make sure we have some power, we have some proliferation going on, some sorters, etc. So I'll do that off screen, and then let's see if this actually works like we want it to. There we go, all up and running. We have the proliferation belt using the third slot on this side going up and then zigzagging its way through our entire build as you're used to by now. Kind of cool, to be honest. Looks pretty nice. As you can see, the build is still buffering up in order to fully start working, but we have most of the assemblers already working on fuel rods. Yeah, nothing really more to add. I think all in all, this is a pretty nice looking build. It's very organized. It has the same amount of buildings on every side, despite we have so many different items being produced within this build. Now, you might be wondering, why am I making tiny amounts of things like magnetic rings and alloy and stuff like that in this build? Well, if you are going to use this build for power production, you do not want to have a situation where you for some reason run out of magnetic rings. That is usually the problem. If you run out of anything, it's going to be magnetic rings in this build. And if you run out of those, your production will not be able to keep up. And if you're relying on that production to power your planet by using those fusion facilities, you will have your entire production chain collapsing on you. So you want to make sure this is always working. There's no guarantee that it will always be working, because of course this relies on power as well. You actually need to make sure you have enough inputs, etc, etc. But all in all, at least you will not have some other type of build siphoning off your production for your fuel rods. Now, last but not least, I want to show you something, because right now I am using the graphite, as you know, and as you can see, one stack of graphite gives me a total of 759 megajoules worth of energy. Now let's take this out and let's replace this with a stack of proliferated fuel rods. Okay, so remember 759, and then we're going to take this out, and now we have 22.5 gigajoules worth of energy just from one stack of these. And of course, a full inventory of that is going to give us 90 gigajoules worth of energy in our chambers. Now, this is way more than you're going to need for a few builds. So all you need to do is make sure you keep a few stacks in reserve. Right now we have about 100 of them, so this is another inventory full worth of energy, and you will be able to supply your nice little robot with a lot of energy. So remember, the proliferation on fuel rods actually has a huge impact, because not only does it increase the energy by a lot, as you can see, it plus 25% energy, it also gives the fuel chamber generation a buff. So all in all, unproliferated fuel rods versus proliferated fuel rods is a huge difference. Okay, so now we have a lot of energy up and running. We have made sure that we are making deuterium. We are making a lot of graphene. If you currently have fire ice, I don't, but I'll have to do it the old-fashioned way. And that means that we are now almost ready to get off planet. Just one problem: we don't actually have warpers yet. So in the next episode, we'll be focusing on progressing our science. And I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will catch you in the next one.